Welcome to Out of the Lab, a podcast interviewing entrepreneurs who've taken research out of the lab and built it into a company that's serving the world. These entrepreneurs are heroes, and the planet needs more of them. So tune in, learn from their successes and failures, and get inspired. Visit bountiful.work to join our community and realize your power to save the world. Hello and welcome to Out of the Lab. I'm your host, Max Finder. Today's guest is Trevor Best. Trevor is the CEO and co-founder of Syzygy Plasmonics. They're pioneering a new type of chemical reactor driven by light rather than heat. So it's a novel photochemical technology that they commercialized out of Rice University. Trevor and his co-founder met at Baker Hughes where they were evaluating new technologies. Baker Hughes is like a really big energy services oil and gas company, and they were evaluating and advancing R&D within that group, and just learned a ton of different things about what technologies work and why they make it and why they don't. And so the story is really cool of Trevor and Suman setting out, reading academic papers, trying to build a few technology startups before Syzygy that failed. Trevor goes into why they failed and some of the avoidable mistakes and lessons learned there. There's also tons of advice for grad students and entrepreneurs that want to build a startup, especially commercializing something out of a university in deep technology. Trevor talks a lot about his TMI, technology market impact assessment methodology, where that's what him and Suman would use every time they found a new technology and got excited about, and the process of finding what the big hairy problem is that you need to unpack and figure out if it's going to kill your business or not. I really enjoyed just understanding how they went about this, from literally reading academic papers to now having a company that has raised several tens of millions of dollars, has 50 employees, and is potentially going to change the game in hydrogen production for just one of the markets that they're attacking at first. He also breaks down how they engaged with the tech transfer office at Rice and what that process was like. It's just a really inspiring conversation that makes you feel like if you have the will and the work ethic, and you can, de-risk and debunk a lot of these technologies, then you can be a deep tech entrepreneur and make really exciting stuff happen. So I really enjoyed this episode. I'm sure you will too. Visit bountiful.work, WORK, to join our community. And thank you for tuning in. Trevor, thanks for joining.
Hey, Max, it is fantastic to be here.
So let's jump right in. I'd love to hear a bit about the Syzygy kind of origin story. So this was a Rice University technology. Your co-founder went there. I mean, can you tell us how everything formed and how you two met and the whole background? I think is going to be fascinating for people.
Yeah, I would love to. So to understand where Syzygy came from, we got to go back to 2015. And my co-founder, Dr. Suman Kadiwada, and myself, Trevor Best, we are working together at Baker Hughes. And we worked at their campus for technology innovation. It's called the Center for Technology Innovation, CTI, in Houston, Texas. And I was responsible for quality management at their invention center. So basically, how do we invent things, and how do we ensure quality throughout that process of getting something out of somebody's head onto paper, make it in the lab, and then export it to the market. And my co-founder is one of the material scientists who actually did these inventions. So I was involved heavily in the process and making sure the process was good. And he was involved in, projects. Together, we worked on, more than 100 R&D projects between us. And in that time, we got a really strong appreciation for the kinds of technologies that made it and the kinds that didn't. In 2015, it was a little bit before the current, clean tech boom that's happening right now. And so when Dr. Kadiwada and I decided that we wanted to get into, renewable energy, things like solar panels, wind, new technologies like the ones we're working on now, the industry was not quite ready for it. And so Dr. Kadiwada and I aren't the kind to get discouraged. So instead of looking internally at Baker Hughes, we turned our focus outside and we started looking at technology coming out of different universities. We were reading all kinds of publications, journals, Nature, Science, what's the really interesting stuff coming out. And we developed this framework, it was TMI, Technology, Market, and Impact, where we would assess the technology, are the inventors, credible? Do they have a good track record? Is it patentable? What does the IP landscape look like? And then market, if we make this, will somebody actually buy it? Will we have a strong value proposition, et cetera? And then finally, impact, where if we do this, does it actually do good for the world? Is there some kind of positive impact that comes out of it? We put dozens of different technologies through this framework. And the idea was, pretty brutal, like just take a, new kind of technology, look at it and try and kill it as fast as you can. Try and find some reason why it won't work, why it won't be able to get to market. And eventually we found this technology at Rice and we started talking to the professors. And lo and behold, we could not find a single reason that would keep this from scaling and becoming disruptive. And at that point, it's like, oh man, we did diligence on it for about 7 months and couldn't break it. And so then I was like, I guess it's time to quit our jobs and go all in on it. And that was back in 2017, and formally launched the company in 2018, and the rest is history.
How long had you two been poking around and reading papers like that?
So this, for me, Syzygy is company number 4. This is my fourth attempt at getting something off the ground. The first 3 didn't make it. This one has. For Suman, I want to say this is number 3. So before this, we had tried to start another company together around water purification. And that was, back in 2015. And so in 2016, when we found this technology, the water purification tech, we actually had some really promising results. It was looking really good, but we found out that the IP, some major names in the chemical industry were arguing over who owned it, and they were suing each other. And if we tried to bring anything related to the kind of tech that we were working on to market, we would have been sued out of existence. So we dropped that one. That's where the technology assessment came from. That whole TMI thing, the technology market impact, those were from learnings. Here's all the reasons why those previous things hadn't worked. Let's check this to make sure that none of those things exist here. So we realized that the water purification tech wasn't going to work really by the end of 2015. By the end of 2015, it was obvious that it wasn't going to go anywhere. So we started our tech search at the beginning of 2016. And we found this technology because of a paper that they published in PNAS. And that paper was published in August of 2016. So about 8 months. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
The more long-winded, the better. So were you evaluating a bunch of these technologies in tandem? And how did you, there's so much stuff that gets published. I'd love to even get to the minutia of it. Like, are you searching on Google Scholar for these things? Or can you talk a little bit more about how you would come across these technologies? From water purification to hydrogen production, I realize there are some similarities in it, I guess, but they're pretty far off as well, right? So how did you find this? How did you come across this paper in the first place?
News articles. So if you open up, any browser, there's always these articles on the front page, and you'll see these sensational articles about scientists find new, CO2 to X technology, or things like that. Of course, monthly publications from major journals. The 2 journals that we've always followed are Nature and Science. They're what we believe to be the most prestigious journals, university news publications. So like MIT, Stanford, Rice, they'll all like put this stuff out there. So you can go check their news sites for recent things. I would also follow Reddit Science. So if you go to like Reddit, and they've got like a science Reddit where it'll post like recent articles in science. So we take in stuff from like a dozen different places, and we were evaluating all these things in tandem. Most ideas, whenever I say we looked at dozens, most ideas wouldn't make it a day or two. Like here, I'll give you some examples. Like, man, I was driving along the Beltway in Houston, and I was looking out over these warehouses, and I was like, man, that's a lot of roof space. What if you started a business and you basically just rented roof space from people and like loaded it up with solar panels? That could be like a lot of power generation, like right in the heart of the city where it's needed, like very little transmission. And I was like, so we really started to dig into this. And it turns out if you build a financial model around that, it is very difficult to make money. And we started talking to some people who like operate warehouses and things like that about like, would you let us like put a bunch of solar panels on your roof? And I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it was just very difficult. And within 10 days, we'd already talked to like 4 or 5 people. We had run a bunch of numbers. We built a financial model, and within 10 days, it's like, okay, this one is not going to make sense. So like on to the next one. We looked at like solar thermal projects. Like if you've ever looked at like the Ivanpah solar thermal plant out in, I think it's California or Nevada, and looked at technologies around that, and found a bunch of reasons why you don't see those things everywhere, and decided maybe we don't want to try our hand at that. And so just very, very brutal, like why won't this thing make it? And always go to first principles. And so like another favorite thing though that I always loved, that I always thought could make it, but we decided not to do it, was gravity battery. And now you see some companies like actually doing that, where you just lift something really heavy up, very high to store energy.
Yeah, I remember Bill Gates had something where they were taking gravel up ski lifts or something like that, and bringing it down during peak power. Yep. And so the TMI process, and this might be too much, TMI, too much information, but is there any formality to it, or would you score these things on 1 out of 10? I mean, can you talk a little bit more about that?
There wasn't really like a scoring rubric. A lot of this would come down to like, I don't want to just say like it's gut feeling, because pretty much everything would come up with some sort of big red flag that you couldn't get past. And that's what you want to work on. So I think a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, and definitely like in my very first ventures, like, I succumbed to this. You've got this, rose-colored glasses on the whole thing, and you find something and you're so excited about it, and you want to focus on all the positive stuff, like, oh, look how cool this technology is. But unfortunately, like, cool doesn't necessarily mean successful. And so, we would always look for like, what is the, big hairy thing that's going to take this down, and focus on that and figure out if you can find a way past it. And, after the first few is tough, the first couple you'll look at them for like, weeks. And then after that, certain patterns start to pop up, like whenever I say, technology market impact, that's where the patterns are. There's so much more nuance to evaluating a company and idea than just those 3 things. But like, those are where the problems typically show up. Like, is the IP encumbered? So like, if you see this really cool article and you're like, oh man, this looks too good to be true. And you start researching the people, and then you find that like everybody's disputing their claims and no one can reproduce their results. You're like, oh, damn, I guess it was too good to be true, you know, or financial model. That gets into the market thing. Man, there's so much stuff out there that like looks really good whenever you say it out loud. But then whenever you actually build like a financial model behind it, you're like, oh man, this thing can't actually make money. So like whenever we'd find an idea, you know, let's start throwing it in an Excel sheet. Like okay, we found this idea 24 hours ago. Let's build the Excel sheet today and start to work that out. When that'll show you a bunch of problems. You know, where does the money end up going? How much do you need to charge per unit to like pull a profit? Like, I'll give you an example on that one. My second one was mobile gasoline delivery. So it's like an app on your phone. You leave your gas tank open, you hit a button on your phone, it'll geofence where your car is. And we would have this like basically gas delivery vehicle that would come fill your car with gasoline. Never have to go to the gas station again. And talk to some people. People are like, oh, you know, I could just like go into work and hit a button on my phone and come back and my car's filled up. Like, that's great. And people seemed interested. Worked on it for like 6 months before I built the financial model. When we built the financial model, we found that in the early days, you'd have to charge $20 on top of the cost of gas to cover like that delivery vehicle and the insurance you'd need and all that. And we started talking to people like, hey, would you pay, well, Max, let me ask you, would you pay $20 on top of the cost of gas to get somebody to deliver gas to your car? Heck no, probably not.
Probably
we found
not,
most people would pay up to $5. If it was $5 or less, people would do it. But more than $5, nobody would do it.
And so some of these ideas sound like stuff, you know, that are good entrepreneurial ideas to investigate and evaluate. But it also sounds like Syzygy kind of came about from the other direction. Like, you were approaching it from reading about breakthroughs in technology, reading about solutions that were in search of a market, as opposed to the other way around. You were solving problems with some of these earlier ideas. Was there a switch in the way that you approached it, or you were kind of doing both things in tandem?
So there's different ways of going about this. And you should be very cautious about, like, when you talk about a solution in search of a market, that's generally a red flag. And so, and going back to the previous stuff that we had done, like, we were taking that approach. And that's a very common failing of a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, especially people like coming out of, you know, PhD programs or coming out of university. They've been working on this technology. They love it. It's their baby, you know, and they want to go find some way to apply it. We did kind of start doing that. By the time we got to the end, though, like with Syzygy, we started looking for technology that was marketable. And so whenever you going into that market thing, is there a pain point strong enough that someone will buy this? Yeah, I said that earlier. Will people actually buy this? And that's something that you need to dig into quite a bit.
Right, but you're still reading about these breakthroughs and then kind of trying to break the market and the impact and the other elements of it down. Something that stood out for me, and I'm curious about, like, you got to assume also that the corporations and other big time like, I don't know, that are reading these same journal publications, the leading ones, or also signed up on MIT's newsletter. Why were you able to approach these tech transfer offices or the researchers, or, you know, why did you feel confident that you could be the one to license this? In my mind, I would be intimidated by all of the competition that's better funded and has a better track record that's out there. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So one was the experience at Baker. You know, Baker was a really fantastic place to work. They gave me, you know, tremendous amount of opportunities, and you know, like family for me. Part of the opportunities that they gave Suman and I were to work on, you know, more than 100 R&D projects between us. And just FYI, like, you know, we only worked in depth on like 1 or 2 dozen, but like in my role as, you know, quality manager for our invention process, I had oversight of a lot of projects. And so I'd sit in like stage gate meetings and things like that. And through that, we had gotten very, very comfortable with new technology development. And so from that, we had the confidence that like, hey, we think that we can take one of these things out of university and do it, because we had been a part of it. We'd seen it done so many times that we kind of know how that whole process works from start to finish. And that's where our confidence came from. How we actually got in, and on the competition side, oh yeah, there was competition. We almost didn't do Syzygy because a few months prior, like over summer 2016, we found another thing, and it was a metal alloy that could be used for implants. And basically, it was much more durable than other alloys. And so right now, if you get a shoulder implant, it only lasts like 10, 15 years, and then you got to replace it. Or a hip implants or any kind of those like joint replacements. And with this new metal alloy, it could last the rest of your life. Like it wouldn't wear out while you were alive. It had a longer life than you do. So we were like, oh man, this could be great. 1 implant and you're done. Huge market, huge impact. And I want to say it was like Merck or something. One of the big medical companies like swooped in and grabbed that. And it's just like, well, you know, what are you going to do? This one, 2 things. One was Suman went to Rice, and he used that connection to meet the professors and get direct access to the professors. The other is photocatalysis. The field of science that we're working in is one of these like pie in the sky fields of science. People have been trying to make photocatalysis work since the 1970s, and no one has ever been able to do it. And so industry has been burnt on photocatalysis. Industry no longer thought it was viable. So nobody was excited about photocatalyst research. And, you know, we find this photocatalyst, and when we're looking and we're doing our tech diligence, we're like, oh man, okay, how does this photocatalyst compare to all the other previous photocatalysts in history? Let's just take a look at that. We're like, okay, ho hum, you know, pull up the numbers, you know, da 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 da. And oh wow, the number for this one developed at Rice is literally 1,000 times better than anything we've seen before. And so it's like, okay, this one is different than all the others. And when you start getting into the numbers, it's like, oh yeah, of course all the others failed because these metrics were way too low. They couldn't compete. And then you look at ours and it's like out competing stuff that's, you know, out competing the traditional processes on the metrics that matter. And so that was whenever it was like, okay, there's definitely something interesting here.
So at Baker Hughes, it sounds like you learned quite a lot of these different techniques. I mean, is that something that you would recommend to grad students and entrepreneurs and other people to go and kind of get that industry experience? Or was that something that you think is somewhat unique to your experience at Baker Hughes in the group that you worked with? Yeah, would you recommend that to other people?
I mean, yeah, I would. I would recommend going into industry and, you know, getting some experience with technology development before you go strike it out on your own. You know, because it is tough, and there are a lot of pitfalls that you can fall into. That being said, I wouldn't say it's a requirement. I've seen a lot of people be successful without doing it. You know, you just need to be honest with yourself about things, and you need to, you know, whenever I say be honest with yourself, you need to go tackle like the biggest, hairiest thing, like whatever it is that might take you down. You need to identify that and like tackle that first.
Right, both on the technology side and I guess on the personal side. You're saying like, what are your biggest weaknesses, and then go and either partner for that or hire for that or something like that.
Yeah, tech side, market side, personal side, all of it. And to be honest, the longer I do this, the less I would recommend to others to become an entrepreneur. It is a very brutal game. And I've realized that if I generally try and discourage people from doing it, because if a human being is able to be discouraged, then they should not do this.
Right. If you're able to be convinced not to do it, then you weren't positioned to do it anyway. Yeah.
If you are like me and you're one of the damned and you're going to do it no matter what anyone says, then like I'll help you. Like, let's do it. But yeah, if you're able to be discouraged, you should probably not do this.
I forget who it is, Peter Thiel or somebody says like it's likened to eating glass, chewing on glass. And the other thing that keeps sticking out for me is this quote from Josh Wolf from Lux Capital. He says, failure comes from a failure to imagine failure. And so I think that's something I'm definitely taking away from this convo is that, just red team your idea relentlessly. And if in the end you can't find something that's wrong with it or you can figure out a way around these different challenges, then you might have something.
Yeah. Another good thing to think about is, has anyone else solved this problem? And how difficult did it look for them to solve it? And so that's a good way to frame problems. When you're evaluating new tech, like you'll see these, there's a new catalyst for whatever. And you start digging into it and you realize like, oh, it's got a problem. And then you're like, okay, has anyone else really solved this problem? And if the answer is no, that's a big red flag.
Right. And so at Baker, I also saw in your bio that you're a Six Sigma black belt and you tout sort of these different skills with quality assurance and regulatory compliance and all these different things. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs don't necessarily have some of those skills and expertise. Did they help you in convincing Rice's TTO that you're the guy for the job? I mean, has it helped you in raising money? It's somewhat unique, I guess, to the software side of the world where you see a lot of the startup activity. People don't necessarily go to large companies, develop a bunch of experience, and then join startups. I think in deep tech, in sort of in clean tech and these other hard technology areas, it seems to be more of the case where industry experience is quite a beneficial thing because you're selling to industry, you're making deals with industry, you're raising funds from industry. I guess it seems to be a trend. Can you speak a little bit about that at even at a high level, how useful this is?
Yeah, so I don't think it's a requirement. It certainly hasn't hurt. Like, I'll let you know, it has been helpful for me, but I wouldn't view gaining those kinds of proficiencies that I have on my LinkedIn, I wouldn't view that as like a prerequisite by any means. If you want to commercialize a technology, you need two things. One is, one person can have both of these. One is you need a PhD. If you don't have a PhD on your team, it's going to be tough to get venture capital to give you money. And so Suman has a PhD. So whenever the investors look at our team, they don't actually think that Trevor is going to be able to make the reactor work. They think Suman is going to be able to make the reactor work. And they're right on that. Like, Suman handles the reactor development. For me, like, whenever I'm out there pitching, like, I'm not using my Six Sigma skills. All those skills that you just listed out, I'm actually only now starting to be able to apply. Now that the company's like, 4 years in, we've got 50 employees, all those kinds of like organizational architecture and, how to apply business statistics and things like that. Like, all of that is really only starting to be able to be applied to the company because we've just been too early before now. So I wouldn't say that it has helped much, and I wouldn't say that people need to do that. I said you needed two things. One was a PhD. The second, though, and this has been my role in the company, is you need someone who who can smile all the time and tell a great story. And that's what I do. I'm the song and dance guy. I get up on stage, I pitch, I make the investors happy, I make the customers happy. I would recommend you have at least a college degree, but there's not really a prerequisite for that role.
And that's sales, plain and simple. And this is what you were doing before the Six Sigma skills came into effect 4 years in and 50 employees. Suman's making the reactor work, and you're going around and selling everybody anywhere you can, everyone you can.
On the story, selling them on the story, on the vision.
Yeah, that's great. So that's inspiring. And so also the fact that it was coincidental that Suman went to Rice and thus had kind of an in with the researchers. I mean, when you started speaking with the inventors and the TTO there, can you start to talk about that process a little bit and what that looked like?
Yeah, sure. And I'd forgotten to answer your question about if having that resume helped with TTO. And in short, the answer is no. Having those pre-required skills did not really help us with tech transfer. The tech transfer process, or at least at Rice, is a very set, rigid process. And there's kind of like two paths. One is like you're a huge megacorp like ExxonMobil and GE, and they go in one path, and then there's everyone else. And so we did not make it in the first pass. So what that looked like for us, we started engaging with the professors in August I think we found the tech in August 2016. We did our, once over the course of like a week or two. Yeah, TMI in August. Another good tool that I think everyone should use is called the Business Model Canvas by Alexander Osterwalder. Would strongly recommend that. So like we did our business model canvas, we did our TMI assessment, and then we went in to talk to him. Suman was actually the one to make the first connection. He met with Peter and got Peter interested. And we met with Peter and Naomi weekly starting in September. So every Wednesday night at 7 p.m., we would meet with them. And basically, we came to the first meeting with a business plan, like this is what we want to do with your technology. And they were curious, and we would assign action items every meeting. We would not assign action items to the professors. They were busy enough, but we would assign action items to ourselves, and we would come the next week and have those completed. And so they got really impressed. After 2 or 3 months of that, they introduced us to their grad students. So we started interfacing directly with the grad students so we could ask a whole lot more technical questions. And at this point, it was really all just a back and forth Q&A on the technology and how it worked. We were trying to understand, it's all quantum processes. So we're catching photons and we're turning those photons into electrons. And, whenever you really get into it, there's some complicated stuff. We start talking about multi-photon processes and all this. And we're trying to understand all this to figure out when we actually build something, how is it going to work? And, that was feeding the creation of that financial model, because, man, the first financial model for Syzygy was fun because it had all these equations about photon flux and things like that. How many lights do we need? How much do the lights cost? Basically, how many photons do we need to make X amount of molecules? How many molecules do we need to make money?
What's the price per photon these days? What's that going for? Yeah.
It was fun. So we did that up until close to Christmas 2016, and then that was whenever we're okay, we need to get serious about this, and we approached Rice OTT with the help of the professors. They introduced us, and the first thing we did was we put an option on the technology. So we just said, hey, we would like to put an option on this, so not a full license, but an option gave us the ability to license the technology. So no one else could license it. It just basically said it's reserved for us. No one else can license it for 12 months. And that was the first thing we did. And that was really easy.
What did they require from you to do that? It was just a somewhat of a formality, like anyone can kind of approach them and get that done.
I wouldn't say anyone. The personal relationship with that like we had with the university, like the fact that Suman was an alum and they have an alum coming to license a technology, I think helped quite a bit. And so I wouldn't say just like anyone could do that. Like if it was just me without Suman, I don't know if they ever would have responded to my emails.
Right, but there was no down payment or no
discussion. There was,
about...
but I don't think we can talk about that.
Okay, stuff. Okay.
But yeah, we did have to put some money down to reserve it. It wasn't a tremendous amount. Yeah, it was reasonable.
And you guys self did that?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't have to answer some of these technical questions, but I may ask them. And so once you had, I mean, this option was critical for you to then be able to take the next step, which was what in the journey?
Well, so get the option on the tech. We really completed our diligence and decided like, hey, we're all in on this. So left our jobs because we'd been doing this like nights and weekends, and hey, just you're talking about like, oh, the technical little minutia details. So for anyone listening, never do any personal work on your work computer. So whenever I say we were working on Syzygy nights and weekends, like I had a dedicated personal computer that I worked on Syzygy, never ever did a single Syzygy thing on my work computer. That is super important to everyone listening. Make sure you do that as well. And then
disclaimer noted.
Yeah, that one's very important. And also another important note is on finances. So I'm sitting here saying like, oh, hey, we personally funded this. The option was not expensive, but it was very apparent to us that we had to successfully fundraise to take it beyond an option and license and start to do patents and things like that, because that stuff does get very expensive. And people need to be thinking about that up front before they make any big decisions. And so, we, finished our diligence, decided like, hey, we're all in on this. We think that if we want to fundraise, we're going to have to leave our jobs for a lot of reasons. So leave in early 2017, start full-time on Syzygy in Q2 2017. And we think like, oh, hey, it'll take us 6 months to fundraise. Ooh, boy. It took us about 12 from the time that I left. First money hit the bank in February 2018. And it was getting pretty tight there. So how things ended up with OTT is that we needed to convert that option into a license. And that was a little bit more painful. And I love OTT at Rice. They're great, but they do not necessarily work on startup timescales. And what we had, some of our investors didn't want to put the money in until the license was signed. And that was a fun couple weeks. So.
And how much was that you needed to raise, that first kind of injection?
We ended up raising about $1 million for the first round, but about half of it was sitting on standby waiting for the license to get signed. And like you talk to a bunch of founders, like venture deals don't just like sit on the table waiting for something like that for months or weeks, like for like 6 weeks or months or something like that. If people are ready to put money in, they're ready to put money in that day, not 6 months from then.
Yeah, and I wondered, just to get your thoughts on it, like what might be a solution to that? Because this is a problem that, we hear quite a lot, like a standardized licensing agreement. I mean, was there so many little details that they really needed to negotiate and go through that deviated from the standard?
It is a cultural difference. And so when you look at like a university administration, the pace at which things move and progress is very different than a startup. And you remember I told you there was like the big boys track, like you got Exxon and GE and Apple on one side, and then everyone else. So those big boys, the big companies that the university's licensed to, they move slow too. So they're very well tuned for each other. But whenever you've got a startup and my life is, listen, I need to get this agreement signed in 2 weeks or these investors aren't going to put money in, it's a little bit more uncomfortable for the university because they tend to not move that quickly. And even doing something like getting a signature can take weeks. And so it was a bit uncomfortable getting that license agreement signed. And eventually Suman and I had to go up there and we just sat in the office and we're like, listen, we aren't going to leave until we have the signed document, or a reason why you're not going to sign it. But we really just aren't going to leave until you like call the cops and or sign the thing. And they finally signed it. But if we hadn't done that, the investors were about to drop, probably like 24 hours. So it did get to that point. And it's not that, they didn't like us or anything like that. It's just very different culture. They aren't used to a situation like what happens in startups where it's like, oh, we need this document signed like today, or we lose out on a bunch of stuff because Apple and those big guys don't work like that. And so solutions, what I've seen work in other universities, and some of the universities have really good programs, is they have dedicated tech transfer personnel who work exclusively with startups and understand how startups work. Another thing I've seen, you mentioned the standardized licensing terms. I've seen that applied very successfully. Negotiating the terms of the license wasn't something that held us up though. Like it's actually just the signature.
It was just the bureaucracy of getting things signed by, the powers that be.
Yep, it was just the signature. It was like, we made it through all the negotiations on the license in like a week or two. And then it was like 6 or 8 weeks for the signature.
Got it. Okay. And so then you got the license, you raised the money, and now you're building Syzygy. That's pretty much how the rest of it shook out, right? Obviously, there's quite a long road ahead, but that's the formation of this game-changing company called Syzygy, correct?
Yeah, bingo, man. You make it sound so easy, Max.
Yeah, exactly. If only it were such. Is there anything like, would you do this process again that you went through for your next successful startup in 10 years or something?
Absolutely. And so when you talk about like the TMI, like technology market impact, absolutely. I would, anytime I'm looking at something, I think about it in those terms now.
Yeah, I almost wish you wrote, maybe you could do it one day in a year, within the year, if you have the time, for our community, is to kind of lay out this framework a little bit and help people assess these things. It sounds like it was somewhat informal, but I still like the approach, TMI, and just make sure that the boxes get ticked.
Yeah, and so the things are on technology. There's like IP diligence, which you are looking for. Whenever I said, is the IP encumbered in any way? So like, does somebody already have claim to it? Are any big names like suing each other over it? Things like that. How much other IP is there in the space? So like, if you've got a new, headset design, there's a lot of headsets out there. Are you going to be infringing on anybody's patents? Go get on Google Patent, look around and try and figure it out. And if it's obvious, like, yes, then step away. If you can't find an obvious yes, then there's probably enough gray area that you can work in. Whoever invented the tech, are they credible? What's their reputation? Go ask other people at the university about them. Do they have a history of overhyping or sensationalizing their findings? If this is like a publication in like Nature or Science, is this their first publication in Nature or Science? Which could be fine, but if this is literally like their first publication ever, like, I don't know, I would have second thoughts about that. Like, for example, I think the Halas group, where we got our technology from, they have another successful company that has spun out based off their technology. And man, they've published like hundreds and hundreds of papers. Like, they're one of the most credible research groups in the US. So it's like, okay, checks out. Market, it's that Excel, that financial model. Like, can this thing make money? Like, start to work out all the details. How many employees are you going to need? How much are you going to have to pay everybody? Factor in benefits, all that stuff. A lot of people like to do like really simple assessment, like, cost of goods sold versus, how much I think I can sell it for. But they don't think about any of the auxiliary stuff. Like, so what is all that? Build out that financial model. Call customers. We participated in this program called NSF I-Core, and it was really great to just kick me in the butt about, like, you need to get up out of your chair and go call like customers right now, and go visit a customer's location. So whenever we were talking about like the solar panels on top of warehouses, and I mentioned like 10 days in, I'd already talked to a bunch of people who, run warehouses. Like, call customers. If we made this, would you buy it? People are pretty nice. You can generally get them on the phone and they'll talk to you for a minute or two. And if they don't know you very well, they'll be pretty blunt with you. Like, nah, I'm not interested in buying that. And if they're like, oh, actually, that does sound interesting, tell me more. If you get that kind of response, then it's like, oh, there might be something here. Then finally, impact, like, do your diligence, make sure that this actually does good for the world. That's more of a personal one.
But I think it is important, and what we're trying to advance here is to try to get more people that's important to, building companies and commercializing important innovation. And so it sounds, some of the inventors are still on your advisory board, and you're still working with them. Are you hiring grad students out of their lab and that kind of thing?
Oh yeah, we will give internships to the university labs that we work with, and we'll hire people out of them pretty frequently. Like, our lead scientist right now, Dr. Hossein Robat Jazi, he was one of those grad students that Peter and Naomi introduced us to back in 2016. Yeah, he's awesome.
And are you hiring any PhDs or grad students at present?
Probably. I don't think, like, you hear me hesitate because I don't want to be like, oh, hey, if you're a PhD or grad student, hit me up. Like, we are hiring chemical engineers, and if someone has a PhD, that is, we take a lot of note on that. I think about a quarter of our company has a PhD. And so, like, yeah, as long as we're hiring, we're going to be hiring, PhDs and grad students, but it's not only PhDs or only grad students. We have a lot of different roles. Okay,
that's good to know. And now I'm going to get to some of these more esoteric questions, but I think they're good and important. So, biggest unavoidable mistake in this whole process, or you can even think about other businesses you've attempted, or however you want to answer.
Oh, I'll tell you why each one died. Business number one died because I didn't pick the right team. People wouldn't show up to the meetings. We had some due dates that got missed because my co-founders wanted to go to a concert more than they wanted to hit the due date. And eventually it just puttered out because we did not have the right group of people who were really committed to making it successful. So learned the lesson on picking the right team. second business, that was the fuel delivery, Fueler. Fueler didn't make it because we didn't build a financial model out the gate. And whenever we finally built a financial model, it became pretty apparent that it can't make money. And in fact, I've seen a bunch of other startups try and start that company, and they all fail. The only one that's still going, I think, is called Yoshi, and they don't make money on delivering gas. They'll also like wash your car and switch out your wiper blades and change your oil, and that's how they make money.
It's funny. Yeah. All right, keep going.
The third one failed because we found this, water purification tech. It was a coating, and you could put it on the inside of a water bottle and basically shake the water bottle, and it would kill bacteria and virus in the water. It's really cool. Made a working prototype. We were super excited about it. And then we found out that the coating, we started digging into it, and we're like, oh, does BASF have IP on this? Does Dow have IP on this? Oh, they're suing each other over who owns it. Like, oh, that's a mess. So we started asking our guy who we're getting this coating from about it. And we find out that he's obviously buying it like under the table from someone in China. And we're like, oh, wow, do you even have the rights to sell this? And that was questionable. And we're like, oh man, we're getting out of this,
What's sad is that that's potentially a game-changing technology to improve the planet, and it's a victim of IP.
Yeah, but I mean, if we tried to take that thing out there, it would get steamrolled. Like as soon as we started fundraising, any investors who like dug into that, it would, yeah. So, hey, market, business number 2, it had to make sure it can make money. Technology, business number 3 had to make sure the technology is good. And so then we get to Syzygy. So those are why those died. The biggest mistakes we made in Syzygy, none of them have killed us. I would say the single biggest mistake we've made in Syzygy is counting on one investor too much. And if you're an early stage company and you're fundraising, never put all your eggs in one basket. That one was painful. That was a painful lesson, but we made it through just fine.
Amazing. And so I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've got a trip to the office right now. What if you had to give a piece of advice either to the younger Trevor or even to any of our grad students or entrepreneurs that are out there listening, what would you say?
I would say, never give up, never get discouraged. If you've decided that you really want to do this, keep at it. I mentioned like this is attempt number 4. Attempt number 1 was in 2013. It took a while. It took a long while. If you're good with the discomfort and the heartache that comes along with this job, keep at it, and eventually you'll get there. But another thing, remember this is attempt number 4. That means I let go of 3 others. Sometimes it hurts more to hang on than it does to let go. And if it's not working, move on to something else that can.
Excellent. Trevor, where can people find you if they want to reach out or try to work with you guys or just connect?
Yeah, the best place is LinkedIn. I don't really have much social. Like I don't have Twitter, don't have Instagram, but LinkedIn, Trevor Best, Syzygy Plasmonics, would love to connect with you.
Trevor Best from Syzygy, thank you so much. This has been another edition of Out of the Lab. Thanks everyone for joining. Visit bountiful.work, WORK, to join our community. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Max.
Thanks for listening. But now we need your help. We're building a community of scientists, students, entrepreneurs, industry leaders, and investors to commercialize meaningful technology and research. Join us at bountiful.work today to find opportunities and realize your power to save the world.